Hello everyone, wishing you a truly wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a story that could change everything. What happens when James secretly orders a DNA test, and the truth might destroy the love he's built with Diep? If you find this story meaningful, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any of the next emotional chapters. The late afternoon sun slowly slipped down behind the half-planted rice fields, leaving streaks of gold across the damp earth. The air carried the smell of wet soil and the faint sound of children laughing somewhere in the distance. It was the kind of peaceful countryside moment that looks simple on the surface, but if you stand there long enough, you can feel the weight people are carrying beneath it. A woman stood beside her heavy load, adjusting the scale with steady hands. 14 kilos, she said plainly, minus the basket leaves. 13. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. She gently persuaded an elderly woman to take the bundle, promising she could resell it to customers and make a little profit. It wasn't just a sale, it was survival, disguised as negotiation. Not far away, a young girl approached, her tired face instantly softening when she saw Nee. She rushed forward and carefully lifted the child from the grandmother's arms. Gratitude poured out of her. She thanked the older woman sincerely for watching Nee, accepted a balloon for the little girl, and bowed her head in appreciation. There was no drama, no performance, just the quiet, raw thankfulness of someone trying to hold life together one day at a time. Their conversation drifted to the unfinished rice fields. There was still planting left to do. Tomorrow, the girl promised. She spoke with calm determination, but you could hear the pressure behind it. Then she added something that revealed more than she probably intended. If anyone needs help planting rice or doing labor, call me. I'll go. 150,000 per day, 200,000 per SRO. The numbers came out matter of fact, but they carried the weight of necessity. This wasn't ambition. This was survival. Her tone was resolute, but fragile at the edges. She said goodbye to both grandmothers, waved to Nee, and promised to visit again when she had time. Then she disappeared down the narrow village path, her figure growing smaller against the fading light. What she left behind wasn't silence, it was that invisible thread of community, the kind where people lean on each other without making it a big deal, the kind that keeps rural life breathing. In that quiet stretch of land, diligence and gratitude flowed like an underground stream. You couldn't see it clearly, but it was always there, moving, sustaining, refusing to stop. And somewhere far from those fields, in a quiet room lit by a dim yellow lamp, James sat alone. This was a man who once made ironclad decisions in boardrooms without blinking, a CEO, a leader, a man used to control. But tonight, none of that mattered. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned pale. His mind wouldn't stop circling the same question. Would Diep be hurt if she knew what I just did? The thought echoed inside him like an accusation. The decision had already been made, but anxiety clung to him like a shadow. He wondered if staying in uncertainty might have been easier, if maybe not knowing would hurt less. But no, if Diep truly was his blood sister and he continued as if nothing was wrong, that guilt would destroy him. The strong, composed version of James, the one who negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was gone. In his place sat a man stripped of armor, exposed and afraid. His pulse raced, sweat slid slowly down his forehead. He stared out the window at the darkened fields beyond, their emptiness reflecting the chaos inside him. The truth could set him free, or it could tear everything apart. He exhaled heavily, his eyes reddening, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of losing Diep, fear of facing a reality that could erase everything they'd built. Fear that love might have crossed a line neither of them saw coming. In that suspended moment, James wasn't a CEO. He was just a man standing at the edge of something that could either heal him or ruin him forever. Meanwhile, under the simple eaves of a modest home, Diep sat beside Nye. The air had turned cool. Rain threatened in the distance, but inside the small room, warmth glowed gently from something stronger than electricity. It was affection. Diep checked Nye's homework carefully. She poured her water. She prepared barbecue for dinner while guiding her through letters. From A to G, she said softly, A with B becomes bar. Add an accent. Bar, bar, bar. She explained patiently, forming example sentences, her voice steady and nurturing. Ba be be, bo be bo. Nye repeated the words proudly, her small voice filling the room. Then Diep shifted to folk poems, verses about gratitude, about remembering the farmer when eating a bowl of rice, about honoring the one who dug the pond when eating a plate of spinach. The words were simple, but they carried generations of meaning. They weren't just lessons, they were values. Next came the playful, sawing wood chant. The strongest carpenter eats the king's rice. The weaker one goes home to nurse. Nye giggled and declared she had already been fed. Diep laughed and promised school would bring friends and playtime. In that moment, Diep wasn't just teaching letters. She was a mother, a sister, a guardian of tradition. Her eyes carried quiet hope, even though she knew tomorrow might mean standing in muddy fields, planting rice, doing whatever work came her way to provide for Nye. Her love burned steadily, like a small flame inside that modest home, fighting off the gathering dusk. As twilight deepened, James waited. A nurse from Dr. Hung arrived, polite, professional, careful. James handed over 2 hair samples. His voice was firm when he insisted on confidentiality. No hospital visits, no names disclosed. How long? He asked. 3 days, she replied. 3 days. The nurse left, and the silence returned heavier than before. James stared at his hands. They trembled slightly now. If Diep and I are siblings, we can't be together. I'll have to accept it. The sentence cut through him like a blade. Memories flooded back. Diep's smile, Nye's laughter, the warmth of shared meals. This wasn't just a test. It was a line drawn across his future. Darkness slowly filled the room, mirroring the spreading unease inside his chest. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the loneliness of carrying this secret alone. 3 days, 3 days standing between love and blood ties, and he had no idea which one would win. The phone rang just as the silence in James's house became unbearable. He glanced at the screen. Diep. He took a slow breath before answering, steadying his voice. On the other end, her tone was warm and familiar, as if nothing in the world was complicated. Come over for dinner, she said gently. It was such a simple invitation, yet to James, it felt like stepping into something fragile, something he might lose at any moment. When he arrived, the humble thatched home was already glowing with warmth. Before he could even step fully inside, Nye's bright voice rang out. "Hi, Uncle James." She ran toward him without hesitation, wrapping her small arms around his leg. In that instant, Something inside him softened. The tension he'd been carrying all afternoon loosened, just a little. He crouched down, smiling. "Hey, little scholar." Diep emerged from the small kitchen area, wiping her hands. The charcoal grill crackled softly, casting golden light across her face. She looked tired, but content. James stepped forward and instinctively helped adjust the grill. "It smells amazing," he said honestly. Diep smiled shyly. "It's just simple food." "I love everything you cook," he replied, "especially bamboo shoots." He laughed lightly. "Remember the day we dug them together in the field? I didn't know bamboo shoots could be that stubborn." Diep chuckled, shaking her head. "You gave up after 10 minutes." "That's not true," he protested. "I was supervising." Nye interrupted them, tugging at James's sleeve. "Uncle James, I need new books. And comics too." James widened his eyes dramatically. "That's a serious request. How many comics are we talking about?" "Many," she declared confidently. He laughed. Okay, I'll buy them." Then she added another demand. "Take me to school tomorrow. Both of you." Tomorrow was the first day of the new school year. James and Diep exchanged a glance. There was something unspoken in that look, something gentle and natural, like they were already a family. "Of course," James said, "we'll take you together." Diep nodded. "We'll eat sticky rice in the morning first." "And then school." Nye clapped her hands. The conversation flowed easily after that. Diep mentioned that if work became busy again, she might have to leave Nye with neighbors during the day. James poured water into small glasses and told them the company would likely resume operations around the 10th. It was ordinary conversation, simple plans, but to James, it felt extraordinary. He sat there listening to them talk, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, a deep sense of belonging. Not in a boardroom, not in a company, but here, on a small wooden stool beside a charcoal grill. For a brief moment, the secret in his chest quieted. The glowing coals reflected in their eyes as they gathered around the low table. The aroma of grilled meat, mixed with fragrant bamboo shoots, filled the small house. Nee suddenly remembered something. "Magic! Uncle James, do magic!" James hesitated for half a second, then played along. "All right," he said, pretending to roll up invisible sleeves. He made a flower disappear, then a watch, then somehow a tiny toy dog that seemed to vanish into thin air. Nye gasped dramatically, clapping and laughing in pure amazement. "How did you do that?" she squealed. James leaned closer and whispered, "Trade secret." Diep watched them, smiling brightly as she served dishes. In that light, with her hair gently falling across her cheek and her eyes shining, James felt his chest tighten. Not from fear this time, but from love. They sat closer together as the food was divided. James tore pieces of meat and placed them carefully into Nye's bowl. Before eating, they joined hands. "Thank you, God, for this meal tonight," James said softly. "Please bless us with health and strength." "Amen," Diep and Nye echoed. Glasses clinked lightly. "Happy New Year. Good health. Prosperity. All good things." The wishes layered on top of each other like protective charms. James praised Diep's cooking again, exaggerating slightly just to make Nye laugh. Diep teased him for being dramatic. Nye asked for more meat. For a while, the future didn't exist. There was only laughter, only warmth, only the simple rhythm of a family sharing dinner. But even in the middle of joy, James couldn't fully silence the thought in the back of his mind. 3 days. The DNA results could change everything. He looked at Diep while she wasn't watching, at the way she carefully refilled Ni's bowl, at the way she brushed ash off the table absent-mindedly. His heart felt full and heavy at the same time. He raised his glass again. "To health," he said quietly. But inside, he added something else. To courage. Because he knew courage would be required, no matter what the results revealed. The firelight flickered across their faces, dancing between brightness and shadow. It felt like a metaphor he couldn't ignore. Happiness, glowing, warm, and darkness waiting just beyond it. Dinner slowly wound down. The plates were nearly empty. The charcoal embers glowed softer now, crackling gently as if whispering the final notes of the evening. They talked about tomorrow again. Sticky rice for breakfast, walking Ni to school together. Diep mentioned that if no labor work came in, she would plant vegetables in the small garden. If someone called her for rice planting, she would go. James nodded. "The company will restart soon. I'll need to bring the workers back." There was responsibility in his voice, but also something else. A desire to build stability, to offer more than temporary comfort. Ni yawned but fought sleep, still bubbling with excitement about school. "You both have to come," she insisted again. "We will," James promised. Hope filled the small house. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, like the flame of an oil lamp pushing back the night. James looked at Diep one more time. His attachment to her had grown deeper than he ever planned. What started as kindness had become something rooted and powerful. And yet, regret hovered at the edges. Not regret for loving her, but regret for not knowing the truth sooner. The DNA results could arrive at any moment over the next few days. They could confirm everything was fine, or they could redraw the boundaries of their lives forever. Still, in this moment, none of that had happened yet. There was only a child's laughter. There were only tender glances across a small table. There were only plans for tomorrow. Outside, the night pressed close around the house. The countryside fell quiet. Crickets sang softly in the distance. Inside, warmth remained. James smiled, masking the turbulence in his chest. He forced himself to memorize every detail. The way Ni leaned sleepily against Diep's shoulder. The way Diep's eyes softened when she caught him looking. If a storm was coming, he would face it. But tonight, he would allow himself this fragile happiness. He would hold it gently, even if he knew it might slip through his fingers.